The city of Virelon Prime was a place of shining towers, glowing skies, and cold hearts. Everything looked beautiful on the outside. Crystal roads, floating gardens, music that danced through the air. But inside the walls of the great houses, things were very different. Kaylara lived in one of those houses. She was not a guest nor a servant by choice. She was owned. The Sarathi people like her had been captured and sold for hundreds of years. With soft wings, glowing eyes, and graceful movements, they were seen as perfect decorations for the rich. Kaylara belonged to Lord Zelthon, a powerful noble with no kindness in his heart. He treated her like an object, a quiet, beautiful thing that stayed beside him at royal events and gatherings. She was trained to smile, to bow, and to never speak unless spoken to. Her silver cuffs weren't just for show. They were genetic, Orcs, symbols of her servitude that controlled her very body. Still, Kaylara was not empty inside. She remembered stories from her grandmother, stories of stars, freedom, and the old days when the Sarathi flew over green skies and sang songs that echoed across the clouds. In secret, Kaylara still dreamed. She watched the stars from her window at night and wondered if freedom still existed somewhere out there. One day, that dream stepped into the palace in the form of a human. Humans were still new to this part of the galaxy. Some saw them as dangerous. Others saw them as wild and unpredictable. But they were known for one thing above all else. They didn't believe in slavery. When Elias Wren arrived, everyone stared. He wasn't dressed like a diplomat. He wore a plain jacket, dusty boots, and walked like someone who'd seen many hard places. A former military man turned trader, Elias had come to Virelon to negotiate trade deals. Lord Zelthon was curious about Terran technology, so he invited the human to a private gathering. Kaylara stood in the hall like she always did, silent, graceful, invisible. But Elias noticed her. Their eyes met for just a moment. Kaylara quickly looked away. She was not allowed to make eye contact with guests. Her heart raced, afraid she had made a mistake. But Elias didn't look away. He kept watching her, not like she was a thing, but like she was someone. Later that night, Elias leaned close to one of Zelthon's advisors. "The girl," he said quietly. "Is she a servant or a slave?" The advisor laughed lightly. "A decorative one. Beautiful, isn't she? Sarathi make perfect house companions, silent and obedient." Elias didn't laugh. He said nothing, but inside, something stirred. Back on his ship, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she stood without speaking, the way her wings were folded so tightly behind her, as if she had forgotten how to fly. The look in her eyes, a mix of sadness and strength. He had seen prisoners before. He had seen war. But this felt different. It felt wrong in a deeper way. The next day, Elias asked to speak with Lord Zelthon privately. "I'm interested in a trade," Elias said. "Something rare." Zelthon raised a brow. "Weapons, engines, data cores?" Elias shook his head. "No, her, the Sarathi girl." Zelthon laughed. "She's not for sale." Elias leaned forward. "Everything has a price. I'm offering rare Terran plasma cores, clean, stable, and untraceable. Enough to power your house for a decade." Zelthon narrowed his eyes. He loved power. Plasma cores were hard to come by. After a long silence, he nodded. "Fine, but she's bound by contract. She's not yours. She's property." Elias stood. "No, she's not. Not anymore." The deal was made. Papers were signed. No one expected it to happen. Not even Kaylara. When they brought her to Elias's ship, the Kestrel's Hope, she said nothing at first. She didn't believe it was real. He looked at her and smiled gently. "You're free now." She stared at him, confused. "Why would you do this?" Elias shrugged. "Because no one deserves to live in chains." Kaylara stood silently, her wings slowly unfolding as if waking from a long sleep. For the first time in her life, she stepped into a space that belonged to no one else. Her journey had just begun, and far above, the stars waited. Kaylara stood quietly in her new room aboard the Kestrel's Hope. It was nothing like the cold palace halls of Viralon Prime. The room was small, warm, and soft lights lined the walls. The bed was real. Not a floor mat, not a servant's cushion, but something made for comfort. There were books on the shelf, a small window looking out into space, and most shocking of all, a door that wasn't locked. She had been given clothes that didn't sparkle or shine. No jewelry, no tight bindings, no symbols of ownership. Just simple soft fabric that allowed her to breathe. Her cuffs were gone. She didn't know what to do. Kaylara sat on the bed, touching the blanket like it was a fragile gift. The silence around her felt strange. No orders, no one calling her name, just quiet. Outside her room, Elias walked through the halls of the ship, checking systems and speaking to his small crew. He didn't mention Kaylara much. He had told the others only what was needed. She's with us now, she's not a prisoner, treat her like you'd treat anyone. The crew, made up of humans and a few friendly aliens, trusted Elias. If he said she was free, they would respect that. Later that day, Kaylara finally stepped out of her room. She moved slowly, like someone who didn't know if they were allowed to walk freely. She found Elias in the common area fixing a scanner panel. He looked up and gave her a small smile. "You slept?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." It was strange, but peaceful. "That's good," he said, standing up. "This ship is your home now. You don't have to hide or ask permission. If you're hungry, the kitchen's there. If you want to learn, the computer has access to many languages and history files. If you just want to rest, that's okay too." Kaylara looked at him carefully. "You don't want anything in return?" Elias shook his head. "No, I just want you to be okay." She lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to be okay. I've never lived without fear." "That's all right," he said gently. "You've got time." Over the next few days, Kaylara watched and listened. She explored the ship bit by bit. She didn't talk much, but she observed everything. The way Elias treated his crew with kindness. The way people spoke freely here without punishment. No one yelled. No one raised a hand. No one looked at her like she was an object. She began to ask questions, first simple ones. How the doors worked, what a navigation panel did, what a hyperspace jump felt like. Elias answered all of them with patience. One evening, Kaylara sat beside him in the cockpit as stars streaked past the window. She had never seen a jump from this view before. Her eyes widened. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yeah," Elias replied. "You'd be surprised how big the galaxy really is." She turned to him. "How did humans learn to fly like this? Your people were not always spacefarers." He chuckled. "No, we weren't. Long ago, we were stuck on one planet too. Fought wars, faced pain, but we kept moving forward. We learned. We reached the stars. And now, we try to do better." Kaylara looked out again. "Your kind is strange. You are rough, loud, but you care. Even when it costs you something. Not all of us," Elias said, "but some try." That night, Kaylara returned to her room and began reading. She used the learning console to understand more about Earth, about Terran laws, freedom movements, and how humans once fought to end slavery on their own world. She read about leaders, rebels, teachers, and ordinary people who stood against cruelty. It filled her with a strange feeling, a warmth mixed with sadness. She had never known that such a path was possible. The next morning, she joined the crew for breakfast. She didn't speak much, but when one of the engineers smiled at her and offered her a cup of sweet tea, she smiled back. Later, Elias found her in the observation room. She was standing close to the glass, her wings relaxed behind her. "I've been thinking," she said without turning around. "I want to learn, not just about your people, but about how to live." Elias nodded. "Then that's what we'll do, one step at a time." Kaylara looked at him. Her eyes were calm now, not full of fear. "Thank you, Elias. You don't owe me thanks, he replied. You deserve your own life. I just helped you start it. She nodded slowly. Still, I won't forget it. Outside the ship, a nebula glowed in bright colors. Kaylara pressed her hand to the glass. She had been born in a world of silence and control. But here, among strangers in the middle of space, she was beginning to find her voice. Kaylara stood in front of the ship's mirror. She no longer wore the fine silks of the palace. Her clothes were plain, practical and comfortable. She tied her hair back the way she liked, not the way she had been ordered to wear it for years. Her wings stretched freely now, no longer hidden or tied down. For the first time in her life, she looked like herself. Elias noticed the change. He didn't say much about it, but whenever she walked into a room now, he smiled in a quiet, proud way. The Kestrel's hope had stopped at a neutral spaceport called Karnas Station, a busy place where all species came to trade, refuel, and gather information. Elias needed parts for the ship and supplies for the crew. He also hoped to make some new deals to keep their journey funded. Kaylara joined him on the walk through the market. Her eyes were sharp and curious. She had been to many places in her life, but always as someone who followed orders. Now she walked beside Elias, not behind him. People stared. Some were surprised to see a Sarathi walking freely, and even more surprised to see her speaking with a human as an equal. But Kaylara ignored the looks. She focused on her steps, her voice, and the new confidence she was building inside. They reached a trader's booth where Elias began negotiating for engine parts. Kaylara stood quietly nearby, listening. She understood trade language well now. She noticed the other trader trying to raise prices unfairly and leaned closer to whisper, "To Elias, he's charging you double," she said softly. "These parts come from Delta 3. I've seen them sold for less." Elias looked at her with surprise, then grinned. He turned back to the trader and pushed harder. In the end, he got the parts at half the price. "Remind me to take you to every deal from now on," he joked as they walked away. Kaylara smiled. "I've lived in palaces where lying is an art. I know how to read faces." But their peaceful visit didn't last. As they walked through a quiet corridor near the docking area, a group of Varelian guards stepped into their path. They wore silver armor and carried the mark of Lord Zelthon. Kaylara froze when she saw them. One of the guards stepped forward. "That woman belongs to House Zelthon. You are carrying stolen property, human." Elias moved to stand in front of Kaylara. "She is not property. She's free." The guard raised a data tablet. "Her contract was never broken. She is still legally bound. Hand her over or we will report this to station security." Kaylara's hands shook, but she stepped forward. "You don't speak for me," the guard sneered. "You are a servant girl. Your words mean nothing." Kaylara's voice rose, steady and clear. "I was bought under false terms, sold without rights. That contract is illegal under Terran law. And under station trade code, I am recognized as a guest of a registered trader." Elias looked at her, impressed. He had never seen her speak like this before. The guards paused. One checked the tablet again, confused. Kaylara continued, "If you try to take me by force, you will break neutral laws. That will cause conflict with Terran authorities." The leader of the guards frowned, then stepped back. "This isn't over." They left without a fight, but the message was clear. Zelthon hadn't forgotten. He still saw Kaylara as something he owned. Back on the ship, Elias sat with Kaylara in the control room. She was quiet now, staring out at the stars. "You were incredible," he said. "You handled that better than I could have." Kaylara shook her head. "I was scared, but I couldn't let them take me back. I would rather die free than live as a decoration again." Elias looked at her carefully. "You're not alone anymore. I'll protect you. But I also know you don't need me to speak for you. You're stronger than you think." Kaylara looked at him. Her eyes softened. "You gave me the chance to be strong. That means more than I can say." He smiled gently. "You took the chance. That was all." You. Outside, the engines of the ship hummed to life. The stars waited and the path ahead was unknown. But Kaylara no longer feared the future. She had stood up to her past. She had used her voice. And she had seen something powerful in herself that no one could take away. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The Kestrels. Hope moved quietly through space, heading toward a quiet moon near the edge of Terran territory. It was a safe place for rest, a small colony where old soldiers, travelers, and peaceful workers lived away from the busy trade routes. Kaylara stood in the observation room watching the stars drift by. Each day, her thoughts became clearer. She was no longer a silent shadow in someone else's world. She was becoming her own person. But change was not easy. Some days she still woke up expecting to hear orders. Other days she felt like her freedom was a dream that might vanish. Elias noticed this. He never pushed her. He gave her space, but he was always nearby when she needed him. When they landed on the moon colony, the air smelled fresh and the sky was full of golden light. Trees with long red leaves lined the walkways. People greeted them with warm smiles. It was a place of peace. Kaylara walked slowly through the open market with Elias. The sounds were gentle. Laughter, music, children, running around. It was the kind of place she had never imagined during her years in the palace. She stopped near a fountain. Birds flew overhead. A little girl ran past her, laughing, holding a wind spinner in her hand. Kaylara smiled. "I've never seen a place like this," she said softly. Elias nodded. "That's why I brought you here. I thought maybe you'd like to see what peace really looks like." Kaylara turned to him. "I do. Thank you." Later, they sat under a tree. Elias opened a small bag and shared food with her. Fresh bread, fruit, and a sweet drink from the colony farms. Kaylara tasted the drink and closed her eyes. "This is the first time food has tasted good," she said. Elias smiled. "That's because no one forced you to eat it." Kaylara laughed. A soft, true laugh. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh like that. As the sun began to set, a woman walked toward them. She was older, with kind eyes and short silver hair. "You must be Elias," the woman said. "I'm Commander Lyra, retired. I run the flight school here." Elias stood and shook her hand. "I've heard of you. You trained half the Terran pilots in this region." Lyra smiled. "Guilty, as charged. You said you had someone interested in learning?" Elias looked at Kaylara. Kaylara blinked. "Me? You said you wanted to learn to live," Elias said. "I thought you might want to learn how to fly too." Kaylara looked at Lyra. "You would teach me?" Lyra nodded. "If you're willing to try, I'll show you the basics." The next morning, Kaylara stepped into the small training ship. Lyra stood beside her explaining the controls, how the ship moved, how the stars worked with navigation systems. Kaylara listened carefully. Her fingers touched the control stick. It felt powerful and unfamiliar. "You don't have to get it right today," Lyra said kindly. "But you have to want to try." Kaylara nodded. "I want to try." Days passed, and Kaylara trained every morning. She made mistakes, but she kept learning. Her movements became steady. Her voice grew stronger. She no longer hesitated when speaking. Elias watched her from a distance. He didn't tell her, but seeing her grow filled him with quiet pride. One evening, Kaylara flew alone for the first time. She soared into the open sky above the colony. Her hands held the controls. Her wings, though not made for flying in space, shimmered with joy. From the ground, Elias looked up and smiled. When she landed, Kaylara ran to him. Her eyes sparkled. "I flew," she said, breathless. "I really flew." "You did," Elias said. "On your own." She looked at him with quiet wonder. "I was always told my wings were only for show. But up there, I felt like they were part of me again." "They are," Elias replied. "You were never meant to be caged." Kaylara grew silent, then said, "Elias, why did you really choose to help me?" Was it just pity? Elias shook his head. No. It was never pity. It was respect. I saw someone strong who had never been given a chance. And maybe I liked you from the beginning. She blushed. Her wings fluttered lightly. I think I like you too, she said. They stood in silence under the golden sky. Kaylara had come from a world that tried to break her, but here on a quiet moon, she had taken her first flight, both in the air and in her new life. And for the first time, the sky didn't feel so far away. Kaylara sat on the hill above the colony, watching the stars blink into the night sky. Her hands were covered in flight grease from another day of training, and her heart felt light. She had flown longer today, turned faster, landed smoother. Lyra said she was ready for real space travel soon. But even in peace, the past sometimes found a way to return. Elias sat beside her, a quiet presence as always. He handed her a warm drink and looked at the sky with her. Kaylara, he said softly, we've received a message. She looked at him carefully. From who? An old contact. A trader named Rivek. He says House Zelthon has put a price on your name. Kaylara's fingers tightened around the cup. They still want me back. Elias nodded. They see you as lost property. But they're also angry. You embarrassed them. And now they want to remind the galaxy who holds power. Kaylara looked away. They never let go of anything, not even a person's life. We don't have to run, Elias said. But we should be ready. The next day, Kaylara trained harder than ever. She asked Lyra to teach her not just flying, but evasive moves, emergency landings, basic ship combat. You're serious about this, Lyra said. I need to be, Kaylara answered. I can't rely on others forever. I want to protect myself and those who helped me. That evening, a small ship landed near the colony. A man stepped out, tall, with cybernetic eyes and a long coat. He walked slowly through the market, asking questions. He wasn't from around here. Lyra was the first to spot him. She called Elias and Kaylara quietly. That man, she said, asked if we've seen a Sarathi girl traveling with a Terran captain. He didn't give his name, but his boots had the House Zelthon mark. Elias frowned. A bounty hunter. Kaylara stayed calm, though her heart raced. He won't find what he's looking for, not unless I allow it. That night, the stranger came closer to their ship. Kaylara waited near the ramp, dressed in her flight gear, her wings folded behind her. She stood tall. The man stopped a few steps away. You're her, he said. The runaway. I'm not a runaway, Kaylara replied. I was taken. Now I'm free. The man smiled coldly. Freedom is a story. You belong to Zelthon. That doesn't change. It already has. He tilted his head. They're offering a great reward for your return. Enough to retire. Then take the reward, she said, stepping closer. By telling them I'm gone. Forever. He studied her for a moment. You're not what I expected. Most runaways beg or hide. You're standing here like a soldier. I'm neither, Kaylara said, but I'm not afraid of you. Elias stepped behind her. If you lay a hand on her, you won't leave this moon. The man looked at Elias, then back at Kaylara. He smiled, but this time it wasn't cold. It was almost respectful. Maybe you really are free, he said. But freedom comes with a cost. Let's hope you're ready to pay it. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Kaylara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Do you think he'll report back? She asked. Maybe, Elias said. Or maybe he saw something he didn't expect. A woman who no longer fears the people who once owned her. Kaylara looked at the stars again. They still looked beautiful, but now they also looked dangerous. I won't let them take me, she said. Not again. You won't be alone, Elias promised. We'll stand together. Later, as Kaylara stood on the deck of the Kestrel's Hope, the engines warming beneath her feet, she thought about how much had changed. She had once been a silent ornament, hidden in rich halls. Now she was a pilot, a learner, a fighter, and something more was growing between her and Elias, not just gratitude, not just respect, but something gentle and real. Kelara looked at Elias as he gave commands to the crew. She saw kindness in him, and strength, and a loyalty that never demanded anything in return. She smiled. The fight wasn't over. The shadows would return. But for now, in this moment, she had peace. And in her heart, for the first time ever, she had hope. The engines of the Kestrel's Hope roared gently as the ship lifted off from the peaceful colony. Kelara stood in the co-pilot seat, her hands steady on the controls. Beside her, Elias gave small instructions, but mostly he watched her with quiet pride. She had learned quickly. Her flight training was no longer just lessons. It had become a part of her. They were heading to a neutral station known as Orvis Ring, a large trade hub built around an old asteroid mine. There, Elias planned to meet a contact who had news about House Zelthon's next move. As the stars stretched into lines around them, Kelara spoke softly. "I feel stronger now, but I know danger still follows." Elias nodded. "Freedom is never easy. But you're not who you were before. You're not running. You're facing it." Kelara gave a small smile. "With you beside me, I feel like I can." When they arrived at Orvis Ring, the station lights glowed red and blue. Ships of every kind floated around the docks. Some were friendly, others less so. They stepped out carefully, with Kelara wearing a pilot's jacket and flight badge. No one would mistake her for a servant now. She walked with confidence, her head high and her wings tucked with pride. Inside the station's lower district, they found Elias's contact, a Terran spy named Mika, who worked in information trade. Mika leaned close and spoke quickly. "House, Zelthon has sent more than bounty hunters. They've hired mercenaries. A small fleet is searching for your ship." Elias frowned. "So it's worse than we thought." "They're angry," Mika continued. "You didn't just take something from them. You showed others that their power can be broken. That's dangerous for them." Kelara nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to show them again." Elias looked at her with surprise. "Are you sure you're ready for what's coming?" Kelara met his eyes. "Yes, this time I'll fight." That night, back on the ship, the crew prepared. Shields were checked, engines tested, weapons loaded. Kelara sat in the control room thinking about everything she had been through. She remembered her days in the palace, where silence was safety and obedience was the only rule. Now she was preparing to face the very people who once ruled her life. She looked around the ship. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't a palace. But it was hers in a way. A place where she had found her voice. A place where Elias had chosen her. Not as a servant, but as someone worthy of standing beside him. The alert lights blinked suddenly. A message came through the ship's system. Unidentified ships approaching. 5 vessels, marked with Zelthon, codes. Kelara stood. "They found us." Elias moved quickly. "To your stations, we're not running." The crew rushed into action. Kelara took the pilot seat. Elias handled communication and weapons. The stars outside turned sharp and cold as the enemy ships came into view. "Broadcasting message," Elias said. "Let's see if they want to talk." The reply came quickly, cold and full of command. "Return the Sarathi woman now, and no harm will come to the rest of you. This is your final warning." Kelara leaned forward. "This is Kelara of the Kestrel's Hope. I am free. I will not return. If you come closer, we will defend ourselves." There was silence for a moment. Then the ships opened fire. The Kestrel shook as energy blasts struck its shields. Kelara's hands moved quickly, guiding the ship through evasive rolls and dives. She had trained for this. She was ready, shields holding, Elias said, firing back. Kelara's eyes stayed focused. Her heart beat fast, but her mind was clear. She moved the ship with sharp turns, dodging incoming fire. A voice shouted from the weapon system. "One enemy down." "Good," Elias said. "4." To go. The fight grew more intense. Explosions lit up space. But Kaylara flew like a natural. She worked in perfect sync with the crew, with Elias, with the ship that had become her new home. Finally, after what felt like hours, the enemy ships retreated, damaged and defeated. Cheers broke out across the Kestrel. Kaylara leaned back, breathing hard. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from adrenaline and relief. Elias turned to her, his voice filled with pride. "You did it. You saved us." Kaylara smiled. "We did it. Together." The ship floated silently for a moment, stars all around them. In that silence, something deep passed between Kaylara and Elias, a bond stronger than words. Elias looked at her gently. "Kaylara, when all this is over, when you're ready, I want to ask you something important." She looked at him, heart steady. "Then I'll be ready to answer." For the first time in her life, she had not only survived a battle, she had chosen it, fought it, won it. And in that victory, she found something even more powerful than freedom. She found love. The battle was over, but the journey was not. The D. Kestrel's Hope floated peacefully in orbit above a quiet green planet. After defeating the Zelthon fleet, Elias and Kaylara had guided the ship to this safe zone, a world without war, full of calm skies and open space. The crew rested, repaired, and reflected. But for Kaylara, this place was more than a resting point. It was the place where she would make her biggest choice. She stood alone on a hill outside a small colony, the wind soft against her face. Her wings moved gently, catching the warm breeze. Below her, the town was waking up. Farmers walked toward the fields. Children played with small hover toys. Life here was simple, and that to her felt beautiful. Elias walked up the hill behind her, his boots making soft sounds on the grass. "I thought I might find you here," he said. Kaylara turned and smiled. "It's peaceful. I like it." He stood beside her. "You've changed since the day we met. Stronger, quieter too, but in a calm way, not in fear." Kaylara nodded. "I feel different, not just because I'm free, but because I know who I am now." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to birds sing. Then Elias reached into his pocket and took out a small silver pendant. It was shaped like a star, simple but elegant. "I wanted to give you this," he said, "not as a gift of thanks, or for what you did in the fight, but as a promise." Kaylara looked at it with wide eyes. "A promise?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, I want to build a life with you, not just as a captain and his co-pilot, but as partners, as husband and wife, if you want that." Kaylara looked down at the pendant, then up at Elias. His eyes were gentle. He had never forced her to do anything. He had only opened the door and waited for her to step through it when she was ready. She took a deep breath. The old part of her, the one trained to obey, was gone. This choice would be hers alone. And she was ready. "I would be proud to be your wife," she said, her voice soft but sure. Elias smiled, not speaking for a moment. Then he reached for her hand and she took it. They walked down the hill together toward the colony, where the crew had already begun to prepare for a celebration. News of Kaylara's fight and her escape from House Zelthon had spread. People from nearby planets had come to the colony to see her, to thank her, and to learn from her. She had become a symbol, not just of freedom but of courage. Still, Kaylara stayed humble. She often said, "I didn't do this alone. I was shown kindness. That kindness gave me strength." One day, a young Sarathi girl approached her. The girl had been born in hiding, her family running from another noble house. She looked up at Kaylara with wide eyes. "Are you really the one who flew through the storm and fought the Zelthon ships?" Kaylara smiled gently. "Yes, but more than that, I was once like you, scared, unsure, lost." The girl asked, "How did you stop being afraid?" Kaylara knelt in front of her. "I didn't stop. I learned to be brave even when I was afraid. And I found people who helped me believe in myself. The girl hugged her and Kaylara held her tightly. Later, the crew of the Kestrel's Hope gathered under the stars. Lights hung from trees. Music played. Food was shared. Elias and Kaylara stood at the center surrounded by friends, old and new. Lyra was there too, smiling with pride. I always knew you had the heart of a pilot, she told Kaylara. But you also have the heart of a leader. Kaylara looked around at everyone. She had once been invisible. Now people saw her not as property, but as a person, a hero, a wife. She and Elias exchanged vows under the stars. No big ceremony, just quiet words from the heart, promises of trust, of respect, of a shared path forward. When they kissed, the crowd cheered. Kaylara's wings opened wide, catching the light shining with peace. She was no longer a servant. She was no longer lost. She was Kaylara of the Kestrel's Hope, pilot, fighter, wife, and free soul, and the stars above, which once looked unreachable, now felt like home.